This is the state of the nation. Evaamu. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Ssali.
Babe, I wanna give you some time. My sweet Timotema, yeah. Baby, come closer, yeah.
Oh, yeah, single sika, yeah.
Babe, I wanna give you some time. My sweet Timotema, yeah. Baby, come closer, yeah.
Are you a lover? Yeah. Are you a lover? You give, Ribazani Uri. Give me love. Give me more and more. Yeah. Follow you. I will be your protector.
I'll be always by your side. Kufa John Collins, Bandi roadside till you come. Give me love. Give me more and more. Now just so alive.
This is love. Feel like I'm losing you.
You should know I forever wanna be with you.
Oh, yeah, single sika. Babe, I wanna give you some time.
My sweet Timotema, yeah. Baby, come closer, yeah.
Oh, yeah, single sika. Babe, I wanna give you some time.
My sweet Timotema, yeah. Baby, come closer, yeah.
I swear to God, I never found this kind of love. You're my baby, you're my telephone. Nashaka panado, yeah. Kubagu no mukwano munji, baby. Give me love. Give me more and more. Follow you. I will be your protector.
Ikanje vyose neka nimekuchagua wewe.
Feel like I'm losing you.
You should know I forever wanna be with you.
Oh, yeah, single sika. Oh no, yeah. Babe, I wanna give you some time.
My sweet Timotema, yeah. Baby, come closer, yeah.
Oh, yeah, single sika. Oh, yeah. Babe, I wanna give you some time.
My sweet Timotema, yeah. Baby, come closer, yeah.
Oh, yeah, single sika. No. Babe, I wanna give you some time, baby. Oh, yeah.
This is the state of the nation. Evaamu. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Ssali.
Three, two, one.
All right. Are you excited? Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ssali. I'm speaking for the African Alumni Association. Before I start, I want to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. And as always, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land for the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. As most of you know, we have a special guest. The University of Toronto African Alumni Association is here to educate. We do not endorse any political interests of any of our guests. Our duty is to educate, to provide you with information so that you can make insightful decisions. Tusomesa busomesa. Omulimu gwaffe gwa kubasomesa. Kubaleetera abamanyi babasomesa. We do not endorse any interests. Buli gwe tuleeta tuba tumuleese, tumuyigireko naye atuyigireko. We question questions. We interrogate ideas. We interact with all people, those we agree with and those we may disagree with. We do not discriminate in sharing ideas. In that instance, we also do not necessarily endorse all the people that we invite on this platform. This conversation is being disseminated on several different platforms that are not necessarily the African alumni platforms, including the Fundemomo Foundation and the Newton Mitala House of Wealth, which is mainly a business entity. Naye nga njagala okubulira nti as investors, I think it is very important to understand the arena within which you operate. It's very important to understand the business aspects, the social aspects, the political aspects, and of course the economic aspects within the arenas where you operate. Tuyiga nga naffe bwe tuyigiriza, tuyigiriza nga naffe bwe tuyiga. Tuli bayizi ate naffe tuyigira ku balala. The University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates as a conduit for knowledge sharing. Tugabana bye tuyiga. If you want to go to the university will come to you, and we shall use so many different entities of so many different dynamics to engage with each and every one. So we appreciate you who is here today trying to listen to us. There are many questions that have arisen ever since I indicated to you that the doctor would be joining us. Most of you will agree with me. Whether you agree with his political interests or not, you will agree with me that Dr. Kizza Besigye is one of the foremost influential political figures on Uganda's political landscape. He probably also knows Mr. Museveni or President Museveni far better than any other politician on Uganda's political landscape. He has been his personal doctor. He has been his National Political Commissar. He has been his minister. Of course, he is also his subordinate within the army, even though he retired. And he has been his biggest nemesis, political nemesis. And of course, there are other people who have come up. They have who waliwo abalala abazze abagezaako okuzoganya naye nga omusajja akyasinza okuzoganya musajja munne ye Dr. Kizza Besigye. You will be listening to him shortly. I'm still trying to give you the background. Bibuuzo ki by'olina regarding the latest innovation, the red card front. Of course, there are so many other campaigns that have happened over the years, including the Walk to Work campaign, Omusajja Ageenda, Quarter Pin Evaamu na Nyondo, which happened to give him the Nyondo name. Abasinga obungi mulimanyi erya Nyondo. So there are so many different campaigns. Tumuwakanye, there are so many campaigns that he has come up with. Of course, the People's Government is part of his conceptions of dissent. He has been a dissenter, a challenger of power, a challenge of status quo. Even though many of you, or a few of you, because I do not have exact numbers, I'm going to say that even though there are some sections of people who think, who actually believe that he is part of the establishment, who is just trying to divert you from supposedly a natural mission that you should be engaging with. So, are you excited? Are you ready? I hope you are, because I am as almost ready as I can be. But first, I'm going to introduce my co-host so that he can also give you a little bit of what excites him and why he's here, and why he particularly thinks this is an important conversation for us to have. Most of you already know him. He is a counsel and he works in the UK. His name is Mitala muzukulu wa Muswangali. Julius Mitala muzukulu wa Muswangali is his screen name. I'm going to invite him to give you his intro as well, and why he was so excited to be a co-host on this conversation. So please welcome Mitala muzukulu wa Muswangali.
Yes, Henry, thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you who are following us, on the different platforms, as Henry has announced. It is indeed a pleasure, we haven't been here for a while for various reasons. Henry has been extremely busy. People who are within the Canadian network, that Henry never rests. Actually, a few times in some of our conversations, I've asked him that, Henry, actually, when do you get time, to sleep? Because I'm always seeing you, all over the place, be it a weekend or a Sunday or whenever. I just don't understand where you get this energy from, Henry. But hand on chest, I recognize all your efforts across the different, areas where you operate to try to bring people together, to educate people, to keep them engaged, and possibly provide a sense of purpose and direction, for a number of people. I am truly excited to be back here. It's been a while, and when Henry contacted me at the beginning of the week and said to me we are going to be having an interaction with Dr. Kizza Besigye, it was just unresistible. I just couldn't resist that. I mean, for a number of reasons. Much respect to Dr. Besigye as a key national figure in our politics in Uganda. So he brings on the table quite a number of interesting things, and it's very nice to have somebody who is knowledgeable, somebody who has been at the forefront of the struggle for the liberation of Uganda, way back from the 1980s to where we are. So it is amazing to have a man like him to be with us today, to be able to explore, all the different issues that we want to explore. So I am absolutely excited. There will be a number of questions, deep questions, as Henry did say, on this platform. Our job is try to generate that interest, and also, to reach out to your deeper insights so that we can be able to get, some very deep conversations on some of our deepest issues that are, happening, around us. I think that's all I could say by way of introduction. Henry's just referred to me, Julius Mitala, or Mitala muzukulu wa Muswangali, which is in recognition of my grandfather, the man who raised me. I always have to pay respects to him, for that matter. But I'm excited to be here. And I hope that every one of you is ready, to have this interesting and beautiful conversation.
This is the state of the nation. Irifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Ssali.
Three, two, one.
Toka kwa barabara, Besigye ameingia, toa basi yako, tunataka kifunguo. Toka kwa barabara, Besigye ameingia, toa basi yako, tunataka kifunguo. Hospitali shoti yame kutozifire. Hospitali shoti yamba mashobero gafire. Hospitali shoti yamba marwaro gafire. Hospitali shoti yambe abahingi ne barira. Dokitari shoti yambe abashawo ne barira.
All right. So this is very funny.
I have a personal connection with that song.
Do you?
I wouldn't want to say it, but I have got a personal connection with that song.
You have a personal connection. All right.
I have a personal connection with that song, and it is a revealing song, and I think you could see Dr. Besigye was urging people on. It's the charisma behind it. Is incredible.
Right. I think it's incredible, as you have rightly said. Dr. Besigye just dropped off the screen. I don't know what's wrong with his network, but hopefully it's coming back. So first of all, going now to go ahead. However, Dr. Wali yakajemirundi everything dropping off. Ajana dropping off. So I don't know what's going on, but we shall continue waiting for him. I think he's as excited as you guys are. He's waiting to engage with each and every one of you. I have a couple of other videos that I can play. Nyanga Wali. Azibasobola zinnyonnyola abantu banze ezimu zisobola zinnyonnyola abantu.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so don't know what's wrong with this network. It just dropped off.
We don't. I don't wanna lose my momentum.
I know no one wants to lose that
momentum.
You have no idea how much I want this to start myself, but it's trying to get a stable connection. Of course, there are so many questions that have been coming in. For example, some people are asking me how come I haven't invited Kyagulanyi so that he can speak with him on the platform. Or any person from the NUP. I have actually invited some of these folks. They just haven't considered the opportunity yet. I have invited Honorable Semujunganda. Is still evaluating the request. I have invited Honorable Muhammad Nsereko. Is still evaluating the request. I have invited Honorable Numbers, I believe, but I didn't get a response back.
Balance the boat, Henry.
I'm trying to balance the boat. I've invited people from the NRM. They haven't yet come. No one has actually showed any interest yet. But the truth of the matter is that we do invite each and everyone who wants to engage, someone who wants to inform others. I think it's very important that we get experts in their own fields to come and teach, educate, interact with the people. I think that's very important
because
and I think that is our responsibility
Because as you did mention here, Henry, for us, we are the medium.
Exactly. We are just the medium.
We are the messenger, you know.
We are the messenger, exactly.
We are not the idea. We are just the medium through which the idea is communicated.
Right.
And I think it's very important. And I think these are some of the conversations we've been having between you and me in the backyard before we came live. That you know, it is very healthy, you know, to have this kind of, you know, conversations. Even and more particularly with the people that you don't agree with.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's why critically important, because when you listen to the people that you don't agree with, it gives you the chance.
So finally, the doctor is here.
I'll stop here because the doctor is here.
Finally, the doctor is here. All right. We did introduce you while you are dropping back and forth. We are excited to have you on the state of the nation. State of the nation is, of course, a dialogue that joins people from all over the world, but mostly Ugandans, to interrogate some of the issues that happen on Uganda's political landscape. There are so many things that have happened. I did introduce you earlier, and you dropped off, and then you came back, and then so the people already know what I have said about you. I'm comfortable repeating what I said, but I did say that you probably know President Museveni more than any political player on Uganda's political landscape, mainly because you were once his personal doctor, you were once his National Political Commissar, you were his minister, you are also his subordinate in the army. But most importantly, you have been his most fierce political nemesis. And everyone who is coming up is just your student. So Dr. Kizza Besigye, you are welcome to the State of the Nation. Tell us about yourself before we begin. And then I'll ask Mr. Mitala to introduce himself to you. Of course, my name is Henry Ssali. I'm a PhD student at the University of Toronto. And I offer this space to each and every person who has information. We do not necessarily promote one political interest over the other. We offer a space for conversation because we think when we interact with people of different mindsets, we grow. So Dr. Kizza Besigye, welcome to the State of the Nation. Tell the people why you are here today.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening from Kasangati, where I live here in Wakiso district. It's a rather warm evening. Maybe it will have a down power tonight. Very sorry for the technical challenges that we experienced in trying to get into your studio this evening. It is indeed part of the grapples that we have to run around with, because I had to change internet sources a couple of times. And this is because quite often they are interfered with from my neighborhood. I do not know how much time you are providing for this interaction, so that I can stick within the time that we have.
So we can go for another maybe 70 minutes if you have the time. I think yes. I blocked off enough time for us to have this conversation, because the last thing I want is for people to leave without having gotten the gist.
So for me, I have the time. First of all, you asked me to introduce myself, as indeed I believe I have been rather notorious in the public arena. So possibly most people have an idea who I am. Originally a medical doctor, trapped in politics because of the troubles our country has gone through. I was at school during very troubled times when the first government of post-independence government was overthrown. I was in Kampala in 1971. Most of you, I believe, were not born by then. And I was in Kampala in 1979 when that government of Idi Amin was also overthrown. I was completing my university education. And, you know, we were very excited at that time, and we thought that Uganda would have a new beginning, but it was not to be. That transition of the UNLA fell through. But it was during that time that I got in some way involved with the politics. I had never been political at all in my entire life. In fact, not only political, but I had never even been involved in any form of leadership activity. I never was a leader or sought to be a leader as a student at all throughout my entire education life. But after university, we thought that maybe it was worthwhile trying to add our voice, at least to add my voice in the reshaping of the country post Idi Amin. And at that time, I joined that's when I joined a political platform, a new political platform that was, in fact, originally thought of as a third force, because as you may know, at independence, there were really two forces, the UPC-KY alliance and the DP. And in the course of time, of course, KY was, you know, destroyed, and by 1980, it had not been available for a very, very long time. Though in 1980, a new party, maybe along the lines of KY, which was the Conservative Party, was formed. But still, there were really two protagonists in the politics, the DP and the UPC. And some of us young people who had never been members of any of these two political forces thought that maybe we would do well with the third force that did not have the baggage of the pre-independence politics and the immediate post-independence politics that had polarized the country rather badly. And so we were thinking of a third force, and the third force idea eventually crystallized into a political party that then Mr. Museveni came to lead, which was called the Uganda Patriotic Movement. And I therefore, in 1980, subscribed to that party, campaigned for it, and as you all know, that election was very, very problematic. In fact, very much similar to the elections that we have had since. And so the military was very much involved. And it was during the campaigns, in fact, that Mr. Museveni said, if you continue using the force of guns to cause a political upset, we shall fight. Some of us did not understand the implication of that, but after the 1980 election was rigged, and it was definite, it was in fact not a rigging, it was overthrown. The election was overthrown because the day after the election, Paulo Muanga, who was then the leader of the military commission that was running the country, went on radio and announced that he had sacked the Electoral Commission, and that all the powers of the Electoral Commission would be exercised by himself, and that he would be the only person to announce the outcome of the elections. And he went ahead and announced whatever outcome he wanted. And so we were extremely disappointed, but I went back to my ordinary life, except that it was disrupted shortly thereafter when now Museveni and some of his people went to the bush, which I had no knowledge about. Some of us who had supported him became victims, and I was one of those who was arrested in 1981 early, tortured very badly, got out of jail by sheer luck. Many people I was with in jail have never been seen again. And that's how I fled into Kenya. But a very annoyed person, determined that I must do something. I was going to die without having done anything wrong at all. And that therefore maybe I should die doing something to permanently have a country, put our country on a sound footing where citizens have rights and where we can be treated with dignity. So eventually, after about 1.5 years in Nairobi, I went and joined the Bushmen, and we went through that war, which is a horror story. It was a very difficult situation, but by the grace of God, we prevailed, and in 1986 came into government. So 1986 and the National Resistance Movement was supposed to be a transitional arrangement. As you may recall, indeed, NRM was a combination of Museveni's group and Yusuf Lule's group, which was called UFF, Uganda Freedom Fighters, and the Popular Resistance Army, united to form the National Resistance Movement as a transitional mechanism to remove the military, what we considered was military rule that usurped people's power in 1980, and reorganize the country, have a constitutional process that establishes how Ugandans want to be governed, and then have free and fair elections after the transitional period, which we had indicated would be 4 years. And the problems began in those 4 years, because then it was very clear that some of our colleagues had no intention of undertaking what we had promised. And so we started, squabbling within the NRM, and that conflict, I think, came to the public around about the time of the constitution making, 1993-94. We had a lot of disagreement in the CA, which I later on wrote about in a document that started my now open contestation with Mr. Museveni. In 1999, I wrote a document talking about how the struggle for a transition had been overthrown, had been sabotaged, had been subverted by Mr. Museveni, and how we had gone back right into another dictatorship. And of course, when I wrote that document, he ordered my court-martialing. He ordered that I become court-martialed because I had written something controversial while still a serving officer of the UPDF. And those of you now who have been following the politics will maybe be aware of what happened subsequently. That contestation is what eventually started my open challenge in 2000, when I declared that I would contest against him. I don't have much time to go into the nitty-gritties of that. Some of it has been written on by some journalists. Regrettably, I haven't written my own story or published my own story yet. By the grace of God, I will at some stage. But I did not intend to contest in 2001. We had a candidate, those of us who were protesting the continuation of Museveni's rule. And at that time, my candidate was the Honorable Jabeli Bidandi Ssali, but who at the critical moment developed different ideas, said that since Museveni was going to have a last term, it was maybe not necessary to challenge him in 2001. We should wait and he serves out his last term. Although it was very clear that there would be no last term from what had been happening prior to that time. And so we disagreed, and in the process of which Mr. Museveni, I think, learned of my hard line and decided to arrest me. And the declaration that I was going to contest against him in 2001 was actually to preempt the arrest so that he arrests somebody who has already publicly declared that they are going to contest against him. But that is, I think, not them. That is my story. It is a long story. Hopefully at some stage I will write about it. I think now where we are is to examine the story of the country. The country, Uganda, as all of you must be aware, was an artificial creation by force of the British, or the Europeans, if you like to generalize, who destroyed our naturally evolving nations. So Uganda is a multinational country. We had different nation states within Uganda. These nation states were forcefully, were destroyed, were overrun, and a new artificial state called Uganda was created and run, therefore, by force for about 70 years by the British. We became subjects of the British monarch. We lost our citizenship and became subjects of the British monarch. Now, that's where, if you want to understand the situation we are in today, that's where you must begin. That, first of all, our nations were destroyed. They are still there, but they were destroyed. And if we want to pick up our pieces, we must relocate there where Uganda comes from, because we did not become a nation by consensus, by willfully saying, okay, we want to become a nation and this is how we will. That's what was attempted at the London conference in 1960, ahead of the 1962 independence. And it was a fragile agreement because it was negotiated abroad. Many people were not consulted. There was the consultation time was, but nonetheless they cobbled together what became the 1962 constitution. That constitution, which if you like, you can consider as the only agreement that Ugandans, the different nations of Uganda, made to willfully become citizens of Uganda, not citizens of their previous nations. Now, that independence constitution, regrettably, as you all know, was attacked and overthrown by force of arms again. Yeah. So what had happened at the creation of Uganda reoccurred when now the independence constitution was overthrown in 1966. And since 1966, therefore, there has not been any legitimate or legitimacy for running Uganda as a state, because right. the only whatever level of legitimacy it enjoyed from the independence negotiations was overthrown forcefully, and there has never been any legitimate transition to have Ugandans agree. The next, what you may call some attempt, was the attempt in 1993-94 at when we had the Constitutional Commission gather views from across the country, a constituent assembly elected, and some constitution-making process undertaken. It is that process that was subverted, that was also overthrown, in fact. That is what I wrote extensively about in 1999, how that process was subverted, was overthrown. Nonetheless, the 1995 Constitution contained some elements that could, to some extent, salvage it. It is those elements that have since been destroyed. The term limits, which could have ended the presidency of the person who took power without election, Mr. Museveni, because Mr. Museveni took power by force of arms in 1986. Now, the term limits would have at least ended that and provided the country with the first opportunity since independence to have somebody who is not incumbent, who has not come through force of arms, become elected. That was overthrown. That was, again, that constitution, the pillars of that constitution, the term limits, the age limits were overthrown. And so what we have now is another military establishment that took over Uganda, sabotaged the constitution-making process, sabotaged the intended transition, now governing literally as a presidential monarch. And as everybody now knows, the idea of Museveni being succeeded by his son is no longer in question. Now, so let's go back, let's fast forward to the front, because I think that was the subject most of your audience, hopefully, we are waiting to hear about.
Yeah,
so
indeed, that's the subject that we're waiting to hear. But I think the background you have given is very good, because it's the context within which we are having all preceding conversations and where the questioning is going to come from. So I want to give my co-host an opportunity to speak to you and first introduce himself, but also speak to what he is expecting in this conversation as you continue to tell your story, but also to inform the nation what's going on and what the red card front really means, its objectives, its vision, its mission. Does it have a goal? How do we get where you think we should be? Mr. Mitala. You're muted, eh? Mr. Mitala, you muted? You're muted.
I always tend to make that mistake. Greetings to you, Dr. Besigye. It's a pleasure to have you here amongst us, having this very interesting conversation. My name is Julius Mitala. I live in London, been living here for a while. I am legally trained. I worked for a number of legal firms around London before I went into legal administration, and that's where I sit at the moment. I'm quite very interested in all the issues that are taking place back home, just like all other Ugandans, who are living abroad, and even Ugandans at home who are interested in seeing, keeping a close eye on developments at home and seeing how we can possibly be able to have a contribution that changes the direction in which, our country has been going for quite a while. So I'm really pleased to be here with you. And I want to thank you for that background information that you've provided. It's very rich. It's very informative. I've always had the view that the history of Uganda, for most people, especially people of our generation, tends to begin to consume the history of Uganda from around 1986, because that's what most people within this generation seem to understand. And I think when you start from 1986, then the problem is that you miss quite a chunk of our historical perspective. And without understanding that historical perspective, I think the message can become very confused and very dilute. So I think Dr. Besigye providing that background information is very useful. Without going into much of what Dr. Besigye has said, I think for me, the key thing, the key issue of interest here that I've had, he touches on the issue of transition, which is a very interesting issue, because let's face facts. I think a lot of people, I don't know, I wouldn't say that the majority, or maybe the majority, but I think there is now a consensus that we are at crossroads as a country. And in terms of this transition, I think it's also now very obvious that, at one point, whether people like it or whether they don't like it, President Museveni is going to have to think about, how he's going to leave power and where he's going to stay and what's going to happen when he has left power. There are certain things that you cannot really run away from. And one of those things is age, we all work. Dr. Besigye has been in work. Henry, you've been in work. Many people have been in work. It's just a matter of time. It comes to that point where you feel you want to take up, the backstage, to retire, to go and do other things, and maybe stop being at the forefront, but also be able to, consume some of the things that you've put together during your hard working days. So I'm pretty sure that Mr. Museveni is thinking about these things. When he looks himself, when he assesses himself, he must be looking at these things, and just like everybody else, he must be thinking about this transition. So that issue of the transition is a very interesting topic, and I think I would like us to explore a little bit more about that. I think the difficulty here we have is that transition governments, and as Dr. Besigye puts it himself, the transition of 1986 was hijacked. So when we talk about the transition here, which we are all preparing for, or where all our focus seems to be, how then can we be sure that that transition won't stall, just like the 1986 transition stalled? So those are some of the things that possibly we'll be exploring. But I am really excited, and I think Dr. Besigye brings on the table, this very deep, rich, detailed kind of insight that a lot of political commenters and political actors possibly they don't have to be able to share with the general public. So that's what I would say on that, as we do explore the discussion and take it a bit further. But thank you, Dr. Besigye, for even agreeing to come and sit on this discussion. You must be assured that lots of people, especially people in the diaspora, and possibly not only in the diaspora, but people across different areas in Uganda, they are interested in this conversation. It is an opportunity. And as I was saying to Henry just before you came on, that for us, what we provide here is we provide the medium. We are not the idea, but we provide the medium, and we do not take sides. We are not saying we support this one or we support this one, but it's very, very important, especially in this day and age, that we engage in these conversations, even with people that we don't agree with. And I think lots of people have talked about dialogue. And I think everybody needs to emphasize that concept of dialogue. We can have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a deadly conversation. You persuade me, I persuade you. I'll persuade Henry, he will persuade somebody else. Can I persuade Dr. Besigye? Can Dr. Besigye persuade me? I think that's really the path we should be taking. This idea of crushing people and finishing off people and doing this and this is just not healthy. It doesn't add anything of substance to our national conversation. So I think for me, those are the issues that I want us to explore. Of course, as we learn a lot more about the red card, and I think that is another, interesting area. When as I was doing my background preparation, the term red card instantly reminded me of the days of Dr. Paul Semogerere. He used to have his red book. I don't know whether Dr. Kizza, you may remember something similar. Dr. Semogerere used to tell us back in the years that he used to have his red book where he used to record all these anomalies, all these crimes and atrocities and excesses. I hope that one day before Dr. Semogerere is too old, or maybe he's out of this world, he might possibly be able to share some of those insights. And I think I would also encourage you, Dr. Besigye. You've written, you've spoken, you've done everything that could possibly be done. But also, it's also important to record that those ideas, in black ink, so that there can be a proper point of reference for people who want to understand this conversation and understand it in greater detail. I think that's what I could say on that.
All right, and as you finished, as you can see, Dr. West just dropped off again. Of course, there is a lot of interest in this conversation, which means state interference is inevitable. There is a lot of information sharing here. This is not your regular TV station where the conversation is often interrupted with adverts or commercials or other speakers. When you get a person of Dr. Kizza Besigye's caliber and the kind of information sharing that he's willing to engage with, the content, whether you agree with it or not, but I think people have the opportunity to interrogate that information. and decide, think for themselves, is this right? If it's not right, what is right? Where does he get this information? So to do more research on the content that he's sharing, and pretty much ensuring that we are giving each and every person who is willing to engage in a genuine conversation regarding the state of the nation, regarding the state of Uganda, and understand what is really going on and where do we go from where we are. We are at section A today. How do we get to section B? How do we get to point B? What do we need to do? Who do we listen to? Do we have to agree with everything that is being said? I think not. Do we have to listen? I think it's in our best interest to listen to as much information as possible, to interrogate as much information as is given, and to build that wealth of knowledge within ourselves, so that we can have the opportunity to make decisions. Because, as you know, indecision is a decision itself, and the more we try to censor, the more we try to stop people from getting the information, we are also becoming culpable to the very system that we are trying to normalize or to make better. And I think that's very important. Dr. Besigye is trying to come back. So he has managed to come back. Dr. Besigye, as you left, we were just encouraging people to engage with the information you are sharing and make informed decisions. But before you come on, I'm going to play a video that I think can help you delve into the red card, specifically how, as the country is grappling with the insecurities that are going on. We talked about Mr. Obote abrogating the constitution, but there has also been a lot of constitutional raping that has happened in the last 7 terms of President Museveni. So let us discuss, let us delve into that after this video.
Charigonza's book, he said his group, the Black Bomber, was being called Akabomu Catalyst. In his book, written, his job, he says in his book, was to make sure people go to sleep at 3. Read Pecos Kutesa, who at one time said he went to bomb a fuel depot in Namwongo, Agip, that the only reason it did not explode, there was no fuel. So the throwing of bombs, bomb throwers keep accusing each other, but it's the method you used yourself, robbing banks, invading government institutions, making people go to sleep. So for you, you are able to win the war. Now you want to define how you should be fought. Whether ideological, that's why I said you must not create conditions. There are bad people who are going to take advantage. Like these bad people took advantage of the 1980 election, and for the next 5 years, Uganda was ungoverned. That's what you deal with as a country. You don't deal with the rebel groups that keep sprouting. Those ones, you'll finish one, another one will come. You'll finish Konye, there will be Rakwena, there will be Moses Ssali, there will be this, there will be, including their own colleagues with whom they were in Ruwero. You overcome that by, I mean, you go in an election, you get beaten. A presidential candidate is beaten. Pecos Kutesa says, the late, very good man, he says in his book, part of the reason he went to the world to fight was that his friend, his mentor, Yoweri Museveni, was arrested and made to sit at a Boroka in Kireka. Where are the MPs? Segirinya is dying in Murago, Aran is in Chigo. The respect that you people wanted, other people wanted. You have a duty, especially you who were in Ruwero. I can't ask you to restore because you wrote a constitution and you've been tearing it apart.
Constitutionally.
Constitutionally, is there anything like tearing a constitution apart constitutionally?
Is it cast in stone?
Why did you make it?
It was amended.
Why did you make
They
it?
are amended.
Every other
Constitutions
person,
are amended.
every other person will do it. All the
Exactly.
indiscipline, the bad manners of Obote they have done.
No.
The only reason
He didn't
and I'm
amend,
answering
he
the point you
abrogated.
made, that this country may explode one.
He
The
abrogated.
only time it hasn't happened is that they are ruling us on gunpoint. Even when he speaks, we are in control. It's not that they have spoken to everybody and the people are happy that they have guns. So next time you write, we will be there to shoot at you, arrest you, and torment you. This country needs to dialogue out of this crisis. We have the same condition, or even worse. An election is like a war. On my nomination day, I was kidnapped by police and driven to the nomination center as a criminal. Why? They said
They took you to get nominated.
Yeah, they kidnapped me.
And took you where?
I had to look for documents.
They took you where?
And subsequently, all the elections, all the campaigns, you faced tear gas, you faced Boko, you have your agents arrested, public address system confiscated.
The best
And then
gun
he says,
point.
All right. Dr. Kizza is back. I'm not sure he has listened to the conversation that we had offered in that clip right there. But as you can see, he is struggling to stay online. He is struggling to disseminate information. He is struggling to share with the country what is going on and what we need, the information we need to interrogate the issues that are affecting Ugandans at large, both at home and in the diaspora to an extent, because everything that happens at home indirectly affects us in the diaspora, whether we want to agree with it or not. I think you can agree with me that when your family is struggling in one way or another, you struggle either emotionally or you struggle in one way or another. So I think it's very important for us to engage with this information. Amawulire gonna ge batuwa okusomesa kwonna kutufuna tulabe engeri ki gye tuyinza okukola ki okuyiga kiki kyoyigamu kiki kyeweetaaga okukola decisions zoyagala okukola. And in that case, I also want to stand with everyone who is celebrating a life that was lost last November during the election massacre that happened in November last year. We stand with the families that lost their loved ones. We stand with each and every person who was injured or tortured during that day. And we pray for you. We feel you. We understand. We don't really understand your situations, but we empathize with you. We empathize with your families. Mwami Mitala. Kubigenda maaso obirowoozaako ki? Conversation ya Dr. Kizza ogirowoozaako ki sofa wano wetuli nga wetumulinda akomewo tujoininga. Njagala n'okwebaza buli muntu yenna atugoberera nti weebale kuba nti oli naffe olwaleero Dr. Kizza waali agezaako okulaba nti addamu okutwegattako ababaddewo earlier baamulabye. Like I said earlier, this conversation is an educational process. We are here to provide information for you. Nkitegeera tuli wano kusomesa ggwanga n'abalibeeramu. Mwami Mitala.
I think it's we have been done a very huge disservice by not being able to have a stable connection so that Dr. Besigye can be able to explain in great detail what this red card phenomenon actually means, the red card front. I think I am interested. Over the years there are so many political actors, political agents that have come on the scene. You know, we can name or we may not name, but we know. And I think you heard the background analysis of Dr. Besigye as he took us through from the 1960s, 1980s, the 1990s, and so forth, and where we are. I think different agents have come and gone, but I think one of the things that cannot be underestimated is that there will probably not be another political agent, another actor in the Ugandan context who has had or who would be able to have as much influence as the influence that Mr. Museveni has had on Uganda's political structure. Not only the Uganda's political structure, but also economically and socially, basically the entire setup of the country called Uganda. I doubt that there will ever be another leader, another president, another political agent who would possibly be able to have the same influence, the same power, the same kind of force that Mr. Museveni has had and he has enjoyed, in our political setup. So really understanding all these forces that are coming up at different times is really important. But I think for me, the question that I would really want to answer, or maybe the question that I would really pose for myself is that, what do these groups, what do they really propose, especially in terms of the transition that Dr. Besigye has thrown into the pot? What do they really propose? What is their agenda? What do they bring on the table? How are we going to be able to shift the conversation, from where we are and take it to a more positive, kind of direction?
And with those questions, let us give Dr. Besigye an opportunity to speak, because his network is being interfered with at the government's will. So, Dr. Besigye, welcome back. I'm not sure if you saw a part of that conversation that that I shared in that clip. Honorable Ibrahim Semuchunganda was talking about the issues that are going on right now and saying that we need to be skeptical of what the government is telling us regarding who is bombing, who's doing the bombings, because according to Pecos Kutesa's book, some of these events happened between 1981 and 1985, and a lot of these things were done by some of the folks who are in government right now. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to go ahead and speak to the events regarding that video, but also open up in regard to the issues or the objectives of the Red Card Front. Dr. Besigye.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And again, apologies for the troubles I'm having connecting with you. You see, to understand what is going on, you have to understand really the anatomy of the political system that we are dealing with, and the political systems indeed that have occupied our space in Uganda. And I told you that history precisely to give you an insight into what we are dealing with. Because you see, what happened to us at independence, the crashing of our nation states, the domination by force, is what we are still grappling with. What only changed is the characters that dominate us by force. But the system of governance where citizens are captive to those who have the force of arms has never changed. And this is an area, where we need to have some kind of a consensus, because up to now, there are quite a number of political actors who don't seem to get it, that the political challenge we are grappling with is fundamentally one where we really have no citizenship. where we are captives, where we are subjects of those with guns who exercise all power and authority. You see, so when we became subjects of the Queen of England, it meant that the Queen or her government had all power of decision making in Uganda. Policy making, decision making, what happens, how our wealth is managed was controlled by those who had power. We had no power over our wealth, deciding how we are governed. We had no power of judging even what is wrong, what is right for us. Power of adjudication. Up to today, that is the case. You know, so when you talk about having a parliament, some people take the parliament seriously, that we have a parliament. That is not the case. Because parliament would be the supreme organ of the state. If power belonged to the people indeed, and they are exercising it through their representatives. That is not the case. The case is that all these are facades, you know, which are just put there to facilitate, create an impression that we have courts, but courts really don't have power. And that's why courts have been attacked by the military to change the decisions of courts. That's why Parliament has been attacked by the military to determine what Parliament must say. And indeed, Mr. Museveni has been saying time and again that if Parliament became a problem, it could be removed, it could be abolished. I mean, governed without Parliament for 9 years. So we have to understand that critical, structure of the power in Uganda to make meaning of what is happening today and what has been happening all this time. So the crisis we have, and when we talk about transition, really, I'm not talking about transition from Museveni to the next leader, just because, as you have indeed said, Museveni may not wake up tomorrow, but that does not mean that gun rule will automatically go away. It won't. Some of you may have seen when Mugabe in Zimbabwe, left the stage. There was some kind of euphoria of people who did indeed not appreciate that was not a transition. It was a transition maybe from one person to another person, but in terms of the systems of governance, it was not a transition. When Mr. Museveni said in 1986 that what was happening at that time was a fundamental change, that fundamental change is what should have been interrogated, because what fundamental change was happening? When gunmen were being removed by gunmen. So what, and this is why, when we discuss how change will come, we must understand these concepts. Because even now, there are many people who say, by the way, Museveni will not go unless we hold guns. So let's get guns and bomb Museveni out. But if we bomb Museveni out, what will cause the bombs that have bombed Museveni out to account to them? How will the new gunmen account to the people? How will people cause them to account to them? And so the struggle at hand, whether during colonial time, whether post-colonial time, is to subordinate those with guns, to make them servants of those without guns. Now, for that to happen, it's a struggle. It's a struggle of subordination. It means those without guns must prove to those with guns that they have greater capacity, greater power. They must subdue them. Those without guns must subdue those with guns in order to gain the power that those with guns have. And that is the struggle that we talk about. But now to focus on the crisis, which includes the crisis of security. You see, once people have no power, once all power is exercised by a few people, it means, as I have said, that those few people control the resources that would otherwise belong to the rest of the people. And they use those resources as they want. They control decision making, they control adjudication. And what has happened in all these years, especially post-independence years, and most of the post-independence years have been under the NRM regime, NRM junta. So what has been happening is that the few people who control power, control our wealth and use it for them, for their own interest, to the exclusion of the greatest majority of the population. So we have a situation where the greatest majority of the people have had their situation worsen progressively, as very few people have their situation improve meteorically, you know. So when people talk about Uganda becoming richer, it is really controlled, that rich, whatever wealth is being talked about is controlled by a handful of people. And so the crisis that was there at independence, which was crystallized into three main problems: poverty, ignorance, and disease. These were the three main problems at independence: ignorance, disease, and poverty. These have intensified. Poverty has intensified actually in the majority of the people. Disease has intensified, and ignorance has intensified in the majority of the people. And on top of those, other problems which were not there at independence have now become huge problems. At independence, everybody had food. There was no hunger. Today, many people have challenges of having food. And at independence, you know, you have to credit the colonialists. They ensured that there was food security. Every home had a granary controlled by the government, and a granary which you were free to use as you like in your home. But the colonial government also had granaries at the sub-county and also national food reserves. Today, there is no reserve of food anywhere, whether at the national, whether at the local government, whether at the home. So we have now a crisis of people who are, you know, have a food crisis. There was no crisis at independence of unemployment. Today, unemployment is a huge, huge crisis. At independence, we did not even have environmental crisis that we have today, you know, where we have all these floods and you know, the droughts then come and cause people to have periods of no food, and you know, the environmental degradation is the one now intensifying the poverty, because the land is no longer productive and people are being removed. At independence, we do not have land grabbing as a crisis. Today, there is a crisis of landless people that have been thrown off their land. You know, lots and lots of people who live in camps, ordinary people who live in camps, like refugees that have been thrown off their land. So there are many things that have happened since independence that were not there at independence. So the crisis of people, human crisis, you know, is extremely, and so if you find people, and I was saying just today, talking about this bombing, you know, people who are walking around many parts of Uganda actually would rather live in a prison where they get some food, where they have some shelter, where they get some free clothes they put on. You find that somebody, and Ugandan prisons, I can tell you, are terrible. But I have been in prisons talking to our prisoners who are comfortable in prison and who tell you when they get out, they cause some trouble and come back to prison because the prison is a better place. If you have such a situation where you have all these young people, and Uganda is a country of, in fact, children, because half the population is below 15 years. So you have all these young people who are hopeless, who have, you know, they don't know what will happen tomorrow. Somebody wakes up, he doesn't know what to do with the day. He doesn't know how to live. He doesn't know. The desperation in the country is incredible. We have had people, you may have read about young people who burned themselves. There was a young boy in Masaka, Hussein Warugembe, whose border was captured. And this was the only thing this young man had in all his life. The policemen were demanding 150,000 shillings to release it to him. This man, the little money he had, went and bought a small jerrycan of fuel, powered it onto himself inside the police station, and set himself ablaze and died in the police station, you know, burning himself. If somebody can burn himself in the police station, how can you tell that person, threaten him with anything? You know, because he has no future. He does not see, he sees just doom. So some of those young people are walking bombs, you know. So
So what do you tell Dr. Besigye? What do you tell to someone who says that Dr. Besigye makes a lot of sense when he's telling us all this stuff, but he once was part of the system that is right now oppressing the people, and I want to put that in this context of this video.
With the question of how much money we are generating in the form of revenue through taxation, which is also directly linked to how much production is going on now. So that's why I'm not worried myself. We have handled it correctly because we have started where it matters. We have started with production. You repair production, eventually you regain your capacity to generate enough revenue. So on this issue of personal hardships, which you have been experiencing as part of your public duties, I would like to inform you that we have already told the minister here to ensure that I think the vehicles are coming, are they not? Yes, we want every chairman of a district to have a vehicle as a chairman. The minister says they will come in about a month's time. And then I'm also trying to work on the issue of bicycles. I think each chairman of the Gomborora and Muruka should have a bicycle, because that would also, we shall try to solve that problem. It has taken a long time also, but I think it will be solved.
How do you respond to that?
Well, frankly, I don't know whether there is anything to respond to there. Yeah. You see, some of the political actors have been questioning my participation in the liberation struggle of 1980. That struggle was perfectly justified.
Right.
I have told you that I went to the bush myself following survival of being killed in detention, illegal detention, because where I was being detained, I was actually at the Uganda Conference Center today. It was not a gazetted place. The torture chambers were in the hotel, Nile mansions. as I have told you, many people I was with in prison have never been seen today. So the brutal governance that was there at that time, the capture of the state following what was supposed to be an election, meant precisely where we are today. It is not any different. In fact, I've been telling people that in the election of 1980, actually, to my knowledge, only one person was killed as a direct consequence of the politicking that was going on there. In the elections we have had since, every election is like a war situation where many people die. People have been gunned down in front of me, like what happened in 2006 at Bulange during the campaigns, when, you know, that fellow called Magala opened fire and killed people in front of me. And you know, they were lying on the floor covered by my posters. Those are the elections we have had since. So if the election where one person died started the war, you know, because of the lack of credibility, usurpation of power of people. So that war, the post-1980 war, to my mind, was justified. What we didn't know then, which at least for me, I gained the experience, which I could have only gained through
being part of. Yeah.
I gained the experience that if you use guns to fight gun rule, you don't cause qualitative change. You cause a change of regime, but you don't end gun rule. And so, though the war was justified, the failure to get a transition was not surprising, because we used the wrong means for the right objective. The objective of getting the transition was right, but the means to gain that transition were wrong. That's why now, and this is what brings us to the
red card front.
To the red card front. So what we now advocate, based on our experience, but talking a little about the tape you played. So I was legitimately a post-war actor. I, in fact, was at a vantage point, because when that video you were playing, at that time, I was the National Political Commissar and the minister in the presidency. So I was at a very vantage point to see the sabotage of the transition process. And that's where my struggles with Mr. Museveni began, because we disagreed. That disagreement, as I pointed out in the opening remarks, became public in 1994, 93, 94 during the constitution making process. But it started in 1988 when I became the National Political Commissar. And in 1990, I was sacked from government. So I was a member of the government for 4 years. And by the way, the transition was supposed to end with those 4 years.
Yeah.
And because of that disagreement, I was summarily sacked. I even never handed over my office. I went to the office and found a letter written by Dr. Samson Kiseka, who was prime minister then, telling me to leave office immediately. Of course, I laughed. I knew Samson Kiseka, that was not his, he was writing as prime minister, but the orders had come from that one who had the power. So the thing is that if you use guns, power rests with the gun commander at the top. And that is what has been happening. So the struggle we have embarked on, so In 2001 to 2011, I have pointed out that when I tried to participate in those elections of 2001 and 2006, first of all, there were very difficult situations. In 2001, parties were not allowed. There were no parties. So every candidate would have to contest as an individual. And I told you also in the opening remarks how I, by accident, became the candidate only 3 months to the election.
Yeah.
And so, although I was very surprised by the level of discontent that was already in the country by that time, because even in 2001, we actually defeated Museveni, except that, you know, having no structures, no capacity to control all parts of the country, we did not gather we even gathered evidence, which we went to court. And as you know, the judges agreed with us, 100%. All the 5 judges agreed that the election was not free and fair.
Right.
But they did not cancel it. When it came to cancelling it, they divided into half. 3 said it can stand, 2 said it should be cancelled. The same with 206. After 201, of course, I went into exile. I was for 4 years away in South Africa. I again came back. I was invited by my colleagues to come back on the eve of the 206 elections. When I came back in October for the elections in February, I only stayed 2 weeks and was arrested. That's when I was charged with treason, with rape, with terrorism, with illegal possession of guns, and I was charged in the military court and in the civilian court. I was eventually nominated from Luzira to become a candidate. I did not get bail until January. And even when I got bail, I was tried for rape up to the time of the voting. I was on trial in the courts. So again, in 2006, it was not possible to know how an election really would play out to dislodge the military regime. But in 2011, I was here for 5 years. Political parties then had been allowed to function or to form and function. We had formed the FDC. We tried all we could to arrange for the 2011 election. And it was the 2011 election for me, which was the watershed, because it proved to me that the elections in and of themselves will not end gun rule. I clearly saw how the electoral process was controlled and manipulated and managed and results announced. So in an election, yes, you may, if you fight hard, you may win a constituency seat for MP, you may become a councillor or even a mayor, but to win power, and I told you that power belongs at the top. It's not in the parliament, it's not in the local governments. Power belongs to the commander who controls the guns that control the country. So to uproot that at the top, I can say to all of you who are listening to me, and I have participated in the most elections, I can claim to have the most vast experience in terms of electoral contests at the presidency. Nobody has contested 4 times. Right. And so I can speak with some level of authority to say that elections in and of themselves will not remove the military rule. And that's what advises us to use other means. And so from 2011, we chose to use the strategy of non-violent resistance to fight military rule in Uganda. So we don't recognize that there is some kind of a democratic process going on, that there is, you know, it may be problematic, as some of our colleagues seem to think, that actually, you know, there is a democracy, it has some weaknesses. For us, we recognize that there is military regime with a thin veneer of civil institutions. And that military regime will not be voted out of office in an election the military regime has organized. So we think that three things should happen. That first of all, we should cause Ugandans to understand what we understand. Secondly, that we should unite all the captives in Uganda, that they should be united into a force that then resists the capture of our state. So, awakening the population, which every Ugandan must have a duty to do. That's why we say change will come through Article number 3 of our Constitution. Article number 3 talks about a situation when constitutional governance has been torpedoed, as we believe has been the case in Uganda. So Article 1, where people have power, cannot function. People have no power. So Article 3 is what empowers every citizen to do everything in their power. And that's why I'm concerned when I hear you fellow Ugandans whom I'm talking to, Bwana Ssali and
Mr. Mitala.
And Mr. Mitala. When you say for you, you have no, you are neutral. You have no side. I cannot understand you because you cannot be a captive. Because what we are talking about is not partisanship. We can have different parties. I can be FDC, you can be DP, you can be UPC, but we are all captives. So in the struggle we are talking about, there are two sides. Either you are part of the captors, those who have captured the country, or you are a captive. So our point is that those who are captives, we must unite. And that's the idea of the front. So everybody, regardless of your party, come with your party, come without a party, let's unite in a front and say no. Enough is enough. And this won't be the first time, by the way. Some of you have forgotten that the British rule, which I talked about, was resisted without guns. People defeated the British rule without guns. It's only that then, when the guns came up, people's mentality changed and they started thinking that guns are the most powerful. People have capacity to overwhelm guns if they are awake, aware, and if they are organized, united and organized. They can definitely overpower the guns. So that's the whole idea of the red card front. The red card itself is a symbol that we use to, first of all, create confidence among citizens that you can pull out a red card, like this card of mine, and say to a military ruler, your time is out. Time up. That's what this card says. It's time up, out.
Yeah.
And if, Mr. Museveni was driving from Entebbe to Kampala, and along Entebbe Road, so everybody holding a red card out to him, would he, people are not, nobody is rioting or anything, but everybody is, wherever he passes, is holding a red card to him. That would have the symbolism of saying, this is our country, and we are not going to allow you to continue dominating us the way we were. But that's not the only action we can take. Now, once we are all awake, united, and ready to take actions to stop these people, we can stop them in 1 week. There would be no regime here. Let me give you an example. If Ugandans now, as we are awakening them all over the country today, if we decided that now from 1st of December, no food comes to the market, and people, during the lockdown, the government has been locking down people. People can lock down the government, and the people with the guns, if people just decide, And this is how the British were defeated. If people just decided that now, on this day, you'll see the soldiers themselves, even before we do anything, the soldiers will be the first to chase Museveni and say, now we have understood you are the one causing us to starve, you are the problem. Like you saw in Khartoum, in Sudan, you see when people came up, the soldiers were the first ones to arrest Bashir. You'll see, even here, when we have taken our position, the soldiers will be the first ones to arrest Museveni if he has not run away by that time. Now, but once they arrest him, then they will come and say, now your problem has been solved. So you open the country for us. And we shall now tell them, yes, we're done. But now your work ends there. Go back to the barracks. We shall tell you what to do. You know, then now the people would have demonstrated to those with the guns that the guns cannot be more powerful than them. That the commander-in-chief of the guns must be a civilian, must be an ordinary Ugandan. Like you saw Obama, an ordinary, Kenyan man or whatever, commanding nuclear weapons in America because the Americans have given him the power. So that's when the transition begins. Transition begins with the defeat of military rule. So the question Mr. Mitala had asked is, how then are we sure that even when we defeat the military rule, we shall not go back where we came from, like when we defeated the military rule in 1986? This defeat would have been different. As I have told you, people would have now been empowered to see that it's possible to subdue the guns. But secondly, what we are trying to do now is to also create a transition timetable to say, so when the military rule ends, this is what will happen. And we have published a document called the Transition Agenda. We have published 3 documents which you should interest yourselves in. The first one is the framework for the People's Transition Front, how we can all unite. And, some people I've heard, say, Besigye is the leader of the... I don't have to lead anything. If people unite and we say this one, but we have agreed on what is to be done. As I've told you, even in my growing up, I have never set out to become a leader of anything. My struggle is to live in a free country. So the first document is a framework of how we can come together. The second document is to show the crisis, this crisis of captivity, where now we have Ugandans forming a bulk of slaves going to work for Arabs and for other people, this crisis that calls on us to act urgently. There is no time. If we don't act urgently, decisively, this country will become a country of foreigners. Like where you live in America. Where are the indigenous Americans? The indigenous Americans are now subjects of affirmative action.
Right.
The indigenous Canadians are subjects of affirmative action.
Absolutely.
The indigenous Australians are subjects of affirmative action. Ugandans, Africans will be subjects of affirmative action soon, and our country, our land, our continent will be taken over by others. Unless we act decisively, act soon, act quickly. Even today in Uganda, in Mubende, a Muzungu evicted a whole sub-county.
Yeah.
A German man, he's there growing coffee. Can you imagine coffee being grown in Uganda by a German? Chinese are the ones growing rice in the whole of that Rwera area, growing rice for Ugandans and taking miles and miles of land. And the people are just there, starving Ugandans, running away to burning themselves with fuel. So there is a crisis. There is a huge, urgent crisis, but a crisis that we can solve. But we won't solve it unless everybody is clear what the crisis is, what the path to solving it is. This is what we are trying to get people to understand. Now, let me end my remarks on this by saying why we have failed so far. And we have failed mainly because of lack of leadership. There is a leadership crisis in Uganda and possibly in the rest of the continent. I have said many times that in the hottest part of hell, if there is such a place as the hottest part of hell, that's where leaders will be found. Because all of these people who are dying, burning themselves, bombing themselves, and so on, this would never be there if really people who have been endowed by God to have better education, to have better tools of analysis, to have a better experience of what goes on all over the world, if they did what they ought to do. The elites in Uganda are really the problem, including those of you who are out there, because you are part of those elites that, you know, we are incapable of crystallizing these problems and providing leadership for the country to get out of this crisis. And that's why, you know, this transition, by the way, what we are talking about, a transition must end with a free and fair election. So, and we have, if you read our transition agenda, so the transition, all these transition front, it's a transitional process itself. It ends at some time when free and fair elections are held. This whole transition thing must end. That's what NRM should have done. If it was to be a transition mechanism, it should have ended after the 4 years, and there should never have been NRM. Then parties and other people would have contested free and fair elections and continue. In fact, we are also saying that whoever manages, all those who are in the management of the transition should not participate in that free and fair election at all. Because again, we don't want a situation where people are legislating for their interests, how to protect their interests and to perpetuate themselves. So why have we failed? 4 things. First, the gunmen stay in power by causing fear in our minds. And the most fearful for themselves are the elites, who don't want to be arrested, don't want to be inconvenienced, don't want, you know, they want stability for their own lives and, you know, drive their children to school regardless of what is happening in the country. And as long as they are able to go to the markets and buy some food and say, well, why? You know, without caring who will change that situation. So fear. And we have fear because we have no confidence in ourselves. Fear is the opposite of lack of faith. We have no faith in ourselves. That's what we must regain confidence and know that this is our country, this is our land. That's the first step. We must overwhelm that fear with our own confidence. Second, the reason we are still where we are is that the regime has used poverty as a tool of control. So they impoverished everybody, control all means of subsistence. And so anybody must clap and appear good to the regime in order to get something. And we have chosen to opportunistically, therefore, seek to be put on a drip of the regime. And if you make a bad noise, they close the tap until you apologize and say, by the way, I didn't know, you are a good thing, then they open the drip a bit for you to leave. We must be able to organize and to fight in spite of our favor. So favors which are used, the favors that you hear parliament is bribed every day. Those favors, the judges are bribed. So the people, political jobs, the councillor of a city now, a councillor in Kampala city earns more than a medical doctor. A councillor of a division, not even of the city, a councillor of a city division of Rubaga, a councillor of Makindi earns more than a medical doctor in the government. So these are bribes, political bribes, for people to continue serving the master. That we must overcome. Thirdly, we must overcome the propaganda machine of the regime, which is why they control information that is available to the population. That's why you can't go on the radio. Up country, in Kampala, we can go on the radios because the people in Kampala have many sources of information. And that's why Kampala and the suburbs, Wakiso, Mukono, they are constantly strong opposition hordes. But you cannot go to Kapchorwa and speak on a radio there. You cannot go to, even here in Mubende, I've been thrown out of the radio station in Mubende many times by the military. So the control of information, we must creatively provide information to our people so that our people can act from the basis of information. But that's because they control the narrative, they also control the propaganda. Right. Part of the propaganda, some of you may have heard, this saying Besigye and Museveni, they are the same, I don't know what. Right. These are part of the narratives of propaganda that are cultivated deliberately by the regime and many other forms of propaganda. What everybody must focus on is what needs to be done. Not even if Besigye was, because tomorrow also I may wake up dead. So should the struggle end there? No. So people must focus on the critical things. So the third thing is that control of information and propaganda. But fourthly, divide and rule. The captives are constantly fragmented and made to conflict with each other. So instead of actually knowing who is imprisoning you, you are busy contesting other prisoners. And you find we are competing of who will be the catikiro in the prison, and this is not just in the politics, but every group that is organized, you'll find is fractured and made to conflict. Whether it is the church, you'll find the Muslims are divided and fighting. You find the Christians are conflicting. You'll find civil society organizations are fighting, and so on and so forth. We must overcome these four things. We cannot overcome them unless we unite, design a program to awaken people, to make all our people aware of all this, to make our people have tools to help us act together, speak together. That is the work of the Red Card Front. And we believe that people are getting the message, first of all, that an election in itself will not remove the military regime, that we all have to struggle, and that to do so, we need to unite and take actions that will free us from the military rule and subordinate the military rule. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kizza Besigye. Mr. Mitala, you have a question.
I have said very little today because I wanted to learn, and I think I've learned, and I'm sure that a lot of people have learned. Because sometimes these messages they don't filter through sufficiently because of the blockages that Dr. Besigye has talked about, and because of the blockages that so many other people are talking about. I think what cannot be underscored, what cannot be escaped is the fact that there is evidence that Ugandans are fed up. There is evidence that Ugandans are fed up. The systems are broken. The political structure is broken, and it's a crisis. It's a crisis. I mean, to borrow maybe to lift direct words from what other people have described. This is I've looked at somebody here who wrote about the situational analysis, in relationship to the front card, and somebody wrote about the situational analysis, listing a catalog of all the problems that you can think about that are currently that have gripped the country. And I think for me, I contrast that situational analysis with the 10-point program of 1986. I contrast it. And you can see that they are direct parallels there. I can read some of them for you. 10-point program, we had democracy, the ending of state-inspired violence, uniting the nation, national unity, limiting foreign interference with our affairs, economic development, social sensitization and access to poverty alleviation, poverty reduction, access to water, clean education and stuff like that, land redistribution, and cooperation of the country Uganda with our neighbors. And I think when you contrast those things with what has been described as the situational analysis in the context of the red card, you can clearly see what those problems are. And some of the things that have been identified here are endemic corruption, land grabbing, educational apartheid, deliberate neglect and improvement of livelihoods, undermining multi-party democracy, and severe assault on political systems. It's a lot. It's a wide-ranging thing. But I think it just points to a bwaweriri, where the problem is. And Dr. Besigye talks about the crisis of leadership, which I agree with.
But I think Dr. Besigye also implicates us, and I think this is very important for each and every person who is listening here today.
Yeah.
At one point in one of his conversations with the media, or within the media, he referred to us as foolish, especially the elites. And I'm going to play that. And I'm going to play that.
Before you play that, Henry, I think actually he has repeated it here, and I kind of feel embarrassed about it, because I think there is seriously this reluctance by people from the white collar kind of class, to get involved in this enterprise, because they are so comfortable. Everybody is protecting their small lot, because nobody wants to get scratched, and of course, if you don't engage in the conversation, if you don't engage in the debate, then how do you expect to reap some of the results, the benefits of that conversation, if you are not part and parcel of the conversation? I think then the call for Dr. Besigye then becomes very relevant in that respect. But I also want to comment on something which has been said again and again, criticizing Dr. Besigye, that why did he, or identifying him with the regime of Mr. Museveni, that he was there to the beginning as one of the founding members and so on and etc. I remember as a young boy, all of us, we admired Mr. Museveni. I remember that, all of us, we used to have songs for him, Some of the games that we played, immediately, I think after the war, as I remember as a young boy, we used to wear, a Mundu Zebi uni, and we went and played, because that is the kind of, it was glamorous, and the country had hope. Everyone had hope that, this was a new beginning. It was the fundamental change that we expected. Several years down the road, has that fundamental change really materialized? That's a question that, you know, that really has to be, you know, pondered. Has that fundamental change really materialized? When you consider all the problems, you know, institutional breakdown, the courts, you know, the terrorization of the citizenry, you know, this the sheer disappearing space of having a conversation like this, decent, you know, on a one-to-one, has completely been destroyed. You know, if you say something that doesn't sit so right with a certain group of people, you are an enemy. But then it just becomes a bit so difficult sometimes to swallow. So I think, as I said, for me today, I decided not to ask so many questions. I think to criticize Dr. Besigye for all the sacrifices that he has, the personal sacrifices he has paid for this struggle. He lost a brother, if I can remember well. I think it would only be really somebody who is stupid who would put his people, you know, before the lion, so that the lion can devour them, so that he himself can be able to reap benefits, you know, out of that situation. I think Dr. Besigye has suffered his own personal sacrifices, and he has given everything that a man could possibly give. And I think people need to appreciate, you know, that those who have put themselves to the forefront, really, other than criticizing them and throwing, you know, water cannons at them, I think they need to be appreciated a bit more. So for me, I feel embarrassed when Dr. Besigye says that the elites, the white collars, they don't want to involve themselves in this conversation, which is true. But I hope that by coming here and putting out your message in clear, plain terms, black and white, I hope that those who want to get something out of it have got something out of it. And, you know, they might use it, you know, for their own advantage in some way or another. So that's what I would say about that. Thank you very much.
No, so, 35 years is 7 terms. We should no longer talk about who is doing this to us. We must now shine a torch on ourselves. And this is really where I think the country should focus. We must realize that as a people, we are foolish.
Sorry?
Totally foolish. And we must deal with it. We must deal with our stupidity. Our own, the country's stupidity. People who are foolish will disappear from earth. The earth is a contestation of how people think. If you don't think, you die. Those who think take over where you were.
And I think that's a very, 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 very sorry.
35.
Right. Let's get back to the conversation. I think that implication of the people, especially the elites, both in Uganda and us abroad, is something that we need to interrogate very closely, because, as he has mentioned, if we do not engage in the contestation of ideas, specifically the ideas that are going to liberate our country, at some point in time, Ugandan indigenous people are going to be thought of affirmatively. They won't have the power to make real decisions in the affairs of their motherland. And I think that is something that we need to interrogate. But in our defense, as the state of the nation or the African Alumni Association here, I think we are trying to get involved and engaging people like you in this conversation and providing space for this dialogue. And in order to provide space for dialogue, you have to have some degree of impartiality in who you invite, who you include in the conversations, how you engage with conversations. So sometimes it's going to include asking tough questions. Sometimes it's going to include inviting people that are extremely unpopular. And that backlash comes back on us. Sometimes, so I think we may not be directly engaged as you have envisioned, but I think offering space for dialogue, for these conversations where you're not directly interrupted by commercials or by state interference in terms of kicking you out of the studio. I think that's a good beginning. This is why we have been able to host people like Stella Nyans at a time when she was most unpopular within the society. No one wanted to host her, but we hosted her, and she gave us her mind on the affairs of the country. This is the reason. This is the reason why we have been able to host people like Mr. Kakwenza Rukila-Basaija. We have hosted people like Mr. Spire Sentongo, Dr. Spire Sentongo. So now we have also hosted you. We have invited, I have personally invited Honorable Senyonyi to come on the conversation, and he's still thinking about it. He's still processing how he's going to engage with the people, or what he's going to tell the people. I have invited Honorable Semujunganda. I have invited Honorable Nseleko. Of course, I need to invite more people to come and engage, because on this platform, we do not censor information. We invite all information so that we can engage with it. So I guess what I have to put to you, Dr. Besigye, right now is, how do we move forward in the process of bringing people together as we provide awareness, specifically the elites, because now you are in a privileged position where you can just make a phone call and say that, Mr. Senyon, Mr. Kyagulanyi, tugende ku program eno tuvulirire abantu. Mr. Whoever it is. The question now is, what are you doing as you are implementing the Red Card Front to bring those influencers together so that you can come up with a tangible solution to securing our country?
Before Dr. Besigye, and Dr. Besigye, I also want you to, I want to add that another question onto that, so that you can just wrap them up together. Is there a space for radicalism in Uganda's politics? Because in some areas, Dr. Besigye, you've been described as an angry radical. So I'm asking the question here, just for clearing up the air. Is there a space for radicalism in Uganda's politics today?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And I hear you, Mr. Ssali, and your defense. I entirely agree with you that a journalistic platform and moderation must be an open-minded one and a fair one. It must be fair to all. What I contest is that even a journalist has no position on what happens in their country. You must have a position. You must take a position. That doesn't mean that when you are engaging, journalistically or providing platforms, that it should not be fair and accommodate all views and invite all the whole range of opinions that are there to be to be engaged with. But as a citizen, you must take a stand. Indeed, as some people say, bad people thrive because good people keep quiet. Because good people do nothing. That's why bad people thrive. So everybody must be involved in stopping the bad people. Now coming to how we approach the question of getting everybody on board. As I told you about the elites, me inclusive, I don't exclude myself, we are a complicated category. Not that we should not continue to engage with each other, but we are a complicated category. So the first and most important audience that our energy is directed to is the population, the general population, who indeed quite many of them may not have the information that is necessary for them to take the appropriate actions. So we would like to get on board, first and foremost, all the people of Uganda in their various, sections of our society. That does not mean that we do not specifically set out to engage with the elite groups in our country. And you may have heard, if you've been following what we are doing after the launch of the PFT, of the Red Card Front, we took off 3 weeks to engage with other stakeholders. And that engagement is ongoing. We want to engage the religious leaders, we want to engage the civil society organizations, and these engagements are continuing. We want to engage trade groups, people like border associations who are very, very important. We want to engage market vendors, maybe street vendors who have associations, maybe not just the elite groups, but also trade group or people who are organized in different groups so that everybody has the same kind of understanding. But we also specifically engage with other political actors who are not on board to make sure that we have the same understanding until we all rally together. But let me also say that in all struggles, you will never have unanimity in terms of organization. No, it doesn't happen. What is disastrous is if the variously organized groups, rather than focus on the problem, if they are diverted to focus on themselves, and you find, rather than focusing on the military capture of our country, we are squibbling amongst ourselves. That's what is disastrous and has been going on, actually. Part of it engineered by the ones who don't want you to focus on them. And so we must be alert to the means that those who capture the state use, which I talked about, the divide and rule. They can come and pretend even to be part of the opposition and foment disagreements amongst the captive groups, the captive society. So we will do everything in our power to engage with all sections of the oppressed population. But we will also, even before that gets done, we must confront the problem. So we will continue doing this even as we resist the junta that holds our country captive. Now, your question, Mr. Mitala, was what was it? Remind me again.
You're muted.
Is there, because in some circles, Dr. Besigye, you've been described as an angry radical.
Oh, okay. Thank you. The radicalism. First of all, anger at a bad thing is not bad as far as I'm concerned. I told you that what radicalized me to go to the bush was a bad situation in which I passed. And, you know, I don't particularly see that as bad, because if I didn't go through that situation, I would not have acted against it. So we have a terrible situation in our country, as I have told you. You know, if you know the kind of suffering that is in our population, the pain that our people go through, it's annoying. And you see, you know, the kind of arrogance and, you know, dismissiveness of those who cause that pain. It's annoying. And I think, you know, it's perfectly all right for people to be annoyed. The question is how we channel that anger. We should not channel that anger recklessly. We should channel it in a structured, organized, and civil way. And that's what, you know, some people may say, you know, somebody even said that I look angry by just looking at me that I am angry. It doesn't matter how I look, whether I talk very passionately about what I don't like. The question is, how do you act? Do you act in a structured way, purposeful way, controlled way? And that's what we need to do. And when I was telling you that, you know, whatever we are doing is structured, that the front we are functioning from is structured, and its structure is public. So you can comment on it, whether this structure of the front is appropriate or whether it should be changed. See, because this is a public thing. It's not for any person's benefit. Secondly, we have crystallized what we are annoyed about that goes on in our country, the crisis that we must remove for everybody to again engage with. Is it true? Is it not true? Even those who are in government, we engage them. Is this true or not true? Is the robbery of our resources that goes on a fact or it's not? Because these are some of the things that are verifiable. You know, when our people were dying of COVID last year, the billions of Ugandan shillings that were sorted away when we were publishing them, you know, saying, you know, how can you take 1 trillion shillings to State House in the middle of a pandemic that it is for classified work, secret work, in the home, not in the office, in the home of a leader, you take 1 trillion shillings. So we crystallize the problems and present them to the public. Thirdly, we have crystallized what we think is the path out of the problem, the transition agenda. We have crystallized it, presented it to the country, comment on it, whether it is the right approach or not, including the strategy, the non-violent resistance. Again, we could have taken a decision to fight. That's what maybe would be characterized as real radicalism. We could have taken up arms and also blown up things and created a terrible situation in the country. No, we did not opt to go that. Again, with the reasons. We reasoned why we need this strategy. If you don't agree with our strategy, present your option. And that's what we've been challenging. Those, even we are with in the struggle for freedom, there are some who still say, you know, elections will work. We respect their view, we disagree. We disagree with the reasons. We tell them why the election will not work, and we provide the evidence why it will not work. We also provide why it's wrong to take up arms with evidence. So that, in other words, radicalism is when I think what becomes radical is when you have not measured, controlled, rationalized your trajectory, your plan, and how you execute it. But I think if it is rational, it is objective, it is published, and you are pursuing that, I don't think that can be considered as radical.
Very good answer, Dr. Besigye. And I think, you know, I'm always intrigued, you know, because everybody knows the glaring excesses. You know, they are captured, they on record, and everybody can see, you know, the glaring excesses within the security services, within this corruption you're talking about, the theft and siphoning of public funds, and so on and so forth. Everybody can see that. But the thing that really intrigues me, and for you guys, because I'm pretty sure that Dr. Besigye, you are very networked. You know, you would be able to know exactly who has done what and who is taken what, and so on and so forth. These people, when you engage them, even indirectly, do they have any remorse in the sense of, you know, what they are doing to the country? Do they have any remorse, or do they fathom a situation whereby tomorrow things might be different and people have got to be made to account? Does it occur to them? Because I think maybe that could be, it could go in some ways to try to persuade us, you know, to engage in this dialogue we are all, you know, crying out for. I was watching the British television here yesterday, the Prime Minister's Question Time, and the Prime Minister had a very, very difficult time trying to defend the position of some of his colleagues who have been, you know, accused of, you know, lobbying and having second jobs in Parliament, or taking money, you know, using their position to disadvantage, you know, the public good. And the Prime Minister had a very difficult time defending that. Even the Speaker of Parliament, who stood up to the Prime Minister and said, "Hey, look here, Mr. Prime Minister, you may be the Prime Minister of the country, but I am in charge of this House. Therefore, if you have to answer questions, you have to answer the questions." Why is it so difficult for us as a nation to get our president to answer these questions? Because he's accountable to the public, he's accountable to the nation. Why is it so difficult to get him to do that?
Because we don't control the gun. He told you that.
Yes, he's not accountable at all. In fact, we are accountable to him, not him accountable to us. He's the controller of everything, is the giver of everything, is, you know, because you see, the Prime Minister you are talking of, if the people become unconvinced about what he was explaining, he loses office.
Absolutely.
He gets out of office. That will not happen here. Because, so what motivation is there for him to listen to you when you have no influence at all in his being where he is? Why should he listen to you? You know? So that's why I told you that there is impunity, there is arrogance, there is I don't care, you know, what you say. What will you do? Yes, what will you do? Nothing. You are nothing. You know, that it is that arrogance, you know, that impunity, that that's what is very, very annoying, you know. And the question was, do they feel some remorse that, you know, no, it doesn't happen that way. You see, they feel that you hear Mr. Museveni call himself a Sabarwan. He knows he has He has the might and the capacity to subdue anybody who challenges him and who raises his head. He will crush it. That's why indeed he uses the words crush. I will crush you. I will crush you. So he feels invisible. Now, some, I must say, some of the beneficiaries under there certainly have the sense to know that what they are doing is dangerous. Some have the, you know, the presence of mind, but you know, those who have that presence of mind will have no influence. They can never dare tell the ones who have that, Mr. Museveni and his family who have all the power. They will never dare tell them that what we are doing can, you know, explode in our eyes. They can't. So those ones will do many things. First of all, they will try to hide away some of their loot in safer places and are on the ready to run when things go bad. Some will also talk to us in private to hedge, to say, you know, if things change, please know I was also with you, you know, and may even pass some little money to us to help us in what in what we are. Please never mention that I helped in this way, but they want you to be their protector when things go.
but also, Dr. Besigye, I think again this is another interesting question. These tendencies, the tendencies of excessiveness in Mr. Museveni's leadership, style of leadership. Did you guys who were with him, did you ever at one place even have, you know, a feeling that, you know, there might come a time when the person you trusted so much, the person you thought had the vision, that there would come a time when he would become the person that he has become? I ask you that question because in 2016, when Mr. Mbabazi was one of the contestants for the presidency at one of those presidential debates, I remember his statement. All of you were asked to say what would, if you had any regrets, what would be that one thing that you would possibly say you regret? And according to Mr. Mbabazi, he said that he did not have the courage to call out those excesses when he saw them. And I think for me, that was a moment of silence. So the question I'm asking here is, you people who have been, we saw you at some time, you've been sat right next to the president, which means that at one point, you must have had his ear direct to you. You could whisper to him. So the question is, did you guys, in those formative years, in those good times, did you ever notice that there were these tendencies of excessiveness that have come to manifest themselves in the person of Mr. Museveni?
I think that's what got him fired, noticing those things and pointing them out. But yes. I'll let him speak for himself.
Yeah, you ought to realize that there were two phases. The first phase was when we did not have power.
Right.
When we were on the receiving end, if you like.
Yeah.
Now, in that situation, there was no opportunity to see whether power can be abused. The opportunity came when indeed power was in the hands. But even in those nascent stages where there was no power, state power to be exercised, there were some warning signs which I have referred to in some of my reminiscences. For example, I have pointed out that while we were still in the bush, there were clear signs of, preferential treatment of certain types of people, which was maybe dramatically exemplified by someone who was nicknamed Magala Atali Ankoko. So we had two Magalas. One Magala was the army commander, actually. So that was now to differentiate him from the Magala, who was also an officer. This one was called Magala Atali Ankoko. So there was Magala Ankoko and Magala Atali Ankoko. And this was real. There was a class of people who ate chicken and ate all kinds of good things, and there were others who ate cassava without salt or any sauce. And although we were all in the same kind of situation.
So essentially, this idea, this concept of Abana Neriana is not a new
yes. So those tendencies were signs of them were there early and caused some bit of concern. In fact, one of the things which by total, I think, accident, I went with to the bush. Among the few items I had in my small bag was the book by George Orwell called The Animal Farm.
Animal Farm, yeah.
And I was attracted to read it to some of the commanders who were very happy with with what I read about the pigs and how they were behaving in the animal farm. And you can see, I don't know why Museveni these days talks very much about pigs, people who cause problems, he calls them pigs. But the pigs of the animal farm are the pigs, you can see them in the government here now, and the whole narrative of how they came to be. So that was something that was seen even at that time. How Ssali, for example, was treated in terms of what kind of indiscipline maybe he would be engaged in and things like that, and how others would be treated. So yes, some of those have come to, inform how they govern now. But as I have said, at that time, the abuse of state power could not have been. But when we came to government, or the initial years, the abuse in terms of coercive means were not prominent in the early years, but the manipulation of the political processes to advantage themselves were quite clear right from the word go, and the corruption that went with it. Those were very clear earlier on, and that's, as I pointed out, how we started disagreeing, and in 1990 parted ways. In fact, we parted ways really before 1990. 1990 was when I was then sacked. But, the saying that power does not really change people, it just reveals who they are,
right,
is very correct. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, you see that really Museveni has not changed. He believes, he actually believes NRM is him and he is NRM. And that's why if you see his narrative, he thinks NRM began with the student movement in 1965, which was himself. so he is the NRM,
but also Dr. Besigye, you've also sometimes described Mr. Museveni as the smartest politician of our time. What did you mean by that?
Well, smartest, I think, is your own word. I have never described him as such. But what, especially the clips that were being used and clearly abused during the last elections, which were showing my statements about Museveni's strength, were obviously put out of context because they just cut out pieces they wanted to take advantage of, which amused me because it showed how desperate really they were for some kind of, being acknowledged as having something good in them, to use me to acknowledge them. But in those clips, yes, I was talking about what strength he has. And, there is no way when I talk about us being foolish, that's what I mean. For somebody to misgovern you for 36 years uninterrupted, it means that he has greater strength over you. He has this, if you are not able to get yourself out of an entanglement of somebody for 36 years, you must credit him for having the capacity to contain 40 million people, and abuse them and, kill them and do all and take their wealth and do all kinds of things and continue. So I was pointing out how he is able to do that, the strength he has that has afforded him to do that. And I pointed out three things. One is that he plans. You may call it an evil plan, but he has a plan. And a long-term one. He doesn't plan for 1 year, he plans a long-term plan. Most of the people who want him to go don't plan. They just respond to his plans. And that's why quite often there is failure, because you have not plotted your own
strategy
path. Yes, your own path to where you want to be. Secondly, he works hard, extremely hard on his plan. He spends many hours a day, non-stop, working on his plan. Many of our people, as I pointed out, they are lazy. They just want to, easy life, enjoy themselves, go to the beach, come back and go to the supermarket, go to eat pork, like where that bomb, found them. Yes. So they don't focus on changing the situation, the overall situation. They live day by day. Thirdly, he knows how to use people. If he sees you, he knows how he can manipulate. Into his plan, to assist his plan. Even if you assist him for a month or 2 months, he would have gone somewhere. Then he can discard you and continue with his journey. So he uses people, he uses and abuses people successfully, so these are some, and if you want to deal with him, you must understand his strength in order to
overcome him.
The last point of interrogation for me, Doctor, and it's not really an interrogation, but I think it's been enjoyable actually, to have you here, because I think you provided this brilliant insight that until now possibly is not being provided on a platform like this. So what do you want? What do you, especially because obviously this platform is being watched by lots of people from the diaspora, you know, people from Canada, people from the United States, people from wherever. And I think that's a force to reckon with. I think as we have said here a number of times, that the time for the diaspora people is about now. I think the voice of the people in the diaspora really matters. So my question to you is that in terms of this Red Card Front and all the other, you know, enterprises that lay in hand, what is your message to those people? What do you want them to do? How do you want them to engage? What message are you carrying for them?
Well, I have already really touched on that our mission, first and foremost, is to get as many people as possible to understand the situation we seek to change. Because there are many versions of the situation we seek to change. So we think that our version of the situation that needs to be changed is the right version. We would like people to engage with it, agree or disagree, and to get their views. That the challenge of the country is primarily living in a captive state. State capture by guns, that is where all the other economic, social, cultural, environmental problems come from. State capture. And that too, if therefore our country is to get a different trajectory, this must be confronted and ended. And that our choice of strategy for doing that is non-violent resistance. So, and that non-violent resistance involves uniting all was the critical mass of people that are captive to work in synergy, to work together in concert, to resist and to defeat the occupying force, the captors, to defeat them. And that once that happens, we right now should have prepared the plan for the transition, which we have provided that all of you can comment on. What should happen from day one when the NRM junta goes to when we have free and fair elections, when a new dispensation would have been formed. One of the cardinal elements in that transition is to reflect on the owner states, owner nations of Uganda, which I told you happened in 1962.
Yeah. We
must have a fresh agreement as Ugandans, how we live together. That's the constitutional making process. It's part of the transition. We must have a new agreement now of free people, because free people have never really engaged within Uganda. As I told you, the 1994, 95, 94, 95, or 93 to 95 process really aborted, was subverted. And what remained of it has been destroyed since then. So we must reflect on how we reorganize Uganda and manage power therein. We believe that a substantial element of that is devolution of power, so that power is not just held in one place. But all these are matters of the transition. So we have outlined what will be done in the transition from day one till we have elections. So that if there is a consensus on this, once it has happened, then it's monitorable. You can say in the first month, in the first year, this is what is supposed to happen. Has it happened? In the second year, this is happened. The third year, until we have a free democratic dispensation that becomes the new Uganda. So it's the duty of everybody. That's why I said all what the front is doing is invoking the power of Article 3 of the Constitution. So read your Constitution, see Article 3. It imposes a duty on every Ugandan. This cannot be a Besigye thing, a Kyagulanyi thing, a whatever. No. It has to be the duty of you and every other Ugandan to rally and to create the new dispensation. In the new dispensation, leaders must be servants, period. People must be the owners, must be the masters of this country. And leaders must be servants, humble servants, like you saw that prime minister who was defending his people because people are concerned. He is a humble servant. And the moment the British say you stop here today, that is the end of him. Like you saw my friend David Cameron, when things changed, he had to step aside. People have spoken. So that's, you are a humble servant and you act according to the will of the people. So that's the end. That will be what would have been the end of the transition, a new first time ever in the history of our country to have a free democratic society. It will be the very, very first time that we have that. If we achieve it, I will work as hard as I can and pray to the Almighty God to help us that I may see the new Uganda while I'm still alive.
As we wrap up,
but before I expire, I will exert myself. I have already spent literally the entire adult life doing this. I will exert myself to see that this happens.
And you've done a great job. You've done a great job, Dr. Besigye. Just as I hand you back to Henry for the final wrap-up, I think as a man of law, I want to be fair to myself for the benefit and reference of the people who are following us to recite for them Article 3 of the Ugandan Constitution, which reads that all citizens of Uganda shall have the right and duty at all times to defend this constitution and in particular to resist any person or group of persons seeking to overthrow the established constitutional order. That's Article 3 of the Ugandan Constitution.
Yes. That's the duty that is imposed on all of us.
I thought that as a legal man, I should have the benefit of reciting that important piece of article for the reference of the general public.
I appreciate
it. I think that's very important. We also recognize that they have some of the folks within the political landscape of Uganda have intimated that our constitution is not set in stone. That's why they have changed it at liberty, even when it means using guns at the parliamentary premises. But in one of your deliberations this evening or tonight, you said that we need to go beyond the 1962. We need to go even right back into when the colonialists came to Uganda and stripped away our citizenships. I want to come back very recently to when you tried to engage the Omusinga of the Rwenzururu, right after your victory was stolen, as you have always put it. The Omusinga wa Rwenzururu was attacked. Over 100 people were killed in his palace, and right now He lives in exile in Buganda. He has never gone back to his kingdom. If we must teach people, if we must create awareness, if we must demand our respective citizenships, the Batoro, the Baganda, the Barenzuruls, the Bacholi, what do we need to do to ensure that there's no more hijacking of a certain indigenous people while others are quietly looking on and not saying anything or raising their red cards to whatever is happening? I think that's going to be the last question, and then we shall wrap up the conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And, you know, what you're asking is the hallmark of the struggle that we are engaged in. You see, even when you know that it's desirable to organize differently, you know, one person who has invested a lot of time and even effort in looking that back to our nation states is the Oweekitiibwa Mulika, Daniel Mulika. Many years ago, he wrote a concept paper about the nation states that formed Uganda and the agreement at independence and the need to recognize that history and legitimacy, where Uganda derives legitimacy from, that Uganda derives legitimacy by these nation states coming together and forming Uganda. That is, you know, well said and appreciated. But I told you that Uganda was a creation of crisis, where Ugandans had no right to accept or not to accept. That must first be reversed. And the only way to reverse that, so that the Banyarwenzururu, so that the Baganda, so that the Acholi can regain their citizenship, is by first defeating that which destroyed and still controls all of them as captives. Hence this struggle. So, you know, in fact, the Musinga of the Banyarwenzururu is not just in exile, he's in prison. He has never left prison. He's not allowed to step outside. Anyway, he's surrounded by soldiers, except that they removed him from Ruzira and are detaining him in a house. He is not allowed to get anywhere outside his house. He's a prisoner. And it's not very different from when the Kabaka was exiled into the Seychelles and kept there as a prisoner. It's exactly the same. The dynamics are exactly the same. If you oppose, if you challenge the authority of the force that is holding the country, you know, by coercion, they will act in that way. In fact, I think what was done to the Musinga or the Obusinga Bwarwenzururu was also in many ways intended to pass a message to the others, you know, whom it may have been more disruptive to treat that way, but they wanted that message to go very clearly that, you know, the power belongs to me. Don't take yourself seriously. you must know where that I am the Sabagabe, as he calls himself, the King of Kings, and you must. It must be appreciated that nothing will change in any direction. I told you that whether it's cultural rights, whether it is political rights, whether it is economic rights, whether it is the social rights, all these will not happen until we free ourselves from the captive state we are in. That's the primacy. That's why it is absolutely primary that those who are more maybe interested in culture, those who are interested in economic justice, those who are interested in whatever justice, we all must pull together and free ourselves. Then each one can enjoy all these rights at the end of the day as we wish. And that's why the transition will help us to construct that Uganda in which all our different aspirations are embraced and protected, including the minorities, those who are minorities amongst us. They also must live in the same country, even if their views or their numbers or whatever have you, they must be protected, and it must be the constitution that protects them against majorities that may quash them. So all this is what we must do in the transition, including healing the wounds that we have. Our country has deep wounds that have been inflicted by the misrule of the different regimes. The wounds of 1966, the wounds of the 1971, the wounds of 71 to 79, the wounds of 79, the wounds of Ruwero, the wounds of Northern Uganda war, the wounds of the war in Eastern Uganda, the wounds of the recent one of the Banyarwenzuru you are talking about, how many people were massacred in Kasese, and so on and so forth. We need a truth-telling, justice and reconciliation process in the transition, so that we can deal with each other's baggage and heal and build a country then in which we live freely and happily as brothers and sisters, knowing our boundaries and where our rights play out. So I must thank you. It has been a rather long program. Of course, started with a lot of problems of logging on to your platform. But I'm glad that eventually it stabilized and we were able to have a conversation. I am always available on this platform or on other platforms, including the other social media platforms. I'm on a number of social media platforms. We can continue the conversation. At the end of the day, it is us to fail our country, or it is us to salvage our country together. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Continue doing the good work that you've been doing.
It has been a pleasure hosting you. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Most people were questioning why I chose to invite you today and asking me why I didn't invite other people, not knowing that this conversation has also been a conversation to get you to this place. We started this conversation, I think, more than a week ago. So it's been an ongoing conversation. We appreciate your time. We know you are very busy. We appreciate that you are accepted to come on a Thursday night. We are usually on air on Sundays, but we had to take some time to ensure that we host you so that you can tell the people what's going on and how they can get involved. Of course, you have implicated all the elites, especially us in the diaspora, and they have challenged us to get involved and have a position.
It's not implication to that, Henry. It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Well, yeah, I think
people are challenged. They should do something. When you challenge, do. It's not possible to sit on the sidelines anymore and watch and see what are they doing. No, that's not possible anymore. It's not possible anymore.
It is not possible.
On a light note, and I'm very conscious of the time. On a very light note, Dr. Besigye, there's one of the people who follows you, and they sent us a message here, and they said, I'm gonna read it as it is. Mungambire nti waliwo die hard amwagala n'ebitaliimu. Therefore, can he surprise me with a blue T-shirt? That trademark blue T-shirt of yours. I think you need to be careful, Dr. Besigye. You need to keep that shirt very, very tightly. It might become a national treasure at some point in time. Looks like people are beginning to notice it. That trademark blue jumper that you wear. But somebody sent a request here. They said, "Can you please ask him? Can he donate that blue shirt to me?" I've delivered that message. I am the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, the hood is also my combat.
Signature combat. Yes.
Yes. When tear gas
thought you were going to put on a hood here. I was hoping you were going to put on one, but I guess you'll put it on another day. And we want to let everyone know that if you want to engage in the conversation, you're more than welcome. If you are out there and you would like to have a one-on-one with Dr. Besigye on this platform, please let us know. We shall arrange that. But you have to know that we do not abuse each other here. We engage in a conversation, even when we have intense conversations or intense contestations of ideas. Please reach out, and we shall ensure that we pass on that message. Thank you so much.
And the people on the other side, you need to give them an audience as well. Balance the boat, Henry. Balance the boat.
Well, I've invited everyone.
People
on
the other side. Yeah. We need to engage with them here as well.
I have invited everyone that I think should share their information, but I can't force anyone to accept the invitation.
Absolutely.
My duty is to invite. I did have to explain a lot to Dr. Besigye that it was important for him to share this information. We had a few back and forth, but eventually said, yeah, it's important. I'm going to come and speak to the people in the diaspora because I thought it was important. And I think that's our duty. We do that. If people want to come, they will come. If they don't want to come, we shall continue being foolish.
Toka kwa barabara, Besigye ameingia, toa basi yako, tunataka kifunguo. Toka kwa barabara, Besigye ameingia, toa basi yako, tunataka kifunguo. Hospitali, shoti yame, kutozifire. Mashobero gafire Hospitali shatuyamba amarwariro gafire Hospitali shatuyambe abahingi nibarira Hospitali shatuyambe abashaho nibarira
This is the state of the nation. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Ssali.